out at camp together, and he's a student at MU, and he and I were visiting, and he said to me, he said, "Steve," he goes, "what am I supposed to do in this culture?" And I said, "Well, what do you mean? Help me out. What's your dilemma?" And he says, "Well, I'm a part of these clubs at MU, and they go on trips, and I don't know what kind of clubs they are, but they go on trips." And he says, when we go, he says, the places we stay, boys and girls are in the same room. He goes, "It's co-ed." And he goes, "What am I supposed to do?" And I said, "Wow." I said, "That's a major situation." I mean, he's a Christian. He understands what God would have him do. But in a sense, where's he going to stay? He says, "This is my dilemma. When I go, they just go, guys and girls stay with each other." And he goes, "I'm stuck." And so again, you talk about pressure. That young man has to decide, do I put myself in a situation? And unfortunately, those are not innocent situations. You don't put college-age guys and girls together in a room and say, "It's okay. I'm sorry." So, you talk about pressure. And I'm sure he's a big guy. I mean, I would not make fun of him because he'd bend me into a pretzel. But he is a big guy. And yet, he's afraid of the pressure and being made fun of, as a college student. Can you imagine what he's going through? And he doesn't have a choice. And so again, the pressure is amazing on our young people and to conform to the culture we live in. Well, how did Daniel and those three Hebrew youth handle it? In verse 8, we find out what Daniel decides to do. Daniel chapter 1, verse 8. And I love this. And it says in Daniel chapter 1, verse 8, "But Daniel resolved to not defile himself with the royal food and wine." In one of the translations, I love this, it says Daniel purposed in his heart. He purposed in his heart. That to me makes that so much deeper. He purposed in his heart. It was a matter of Daniel's heart before God. And today as we sit here, we have to purpose in our heart, who are we going to serve? Who are we going to follow? Are we going to conform to the culture, or are we going to follow God and follow Christ? And it says here that Daniel purposed in his heart not to defile himself with the royal food and wine. And he asked the chief official for permission not to defile himself this way. So he took a stand. His conviction was, this is what God has told me to do, and this is my stand. He purposed in his heart. Now, can you imagine what's running through his mind when he says this? Now, he was very cordial. Remember, he's a pretty intelligent guy. He probably just didn't say, "Hey, I'm not doing this." Okay, he makes a plea. Now, this official has some responsibilities. And look what he says here. I missed something here. Look at verse 9. Now remember in verse 2, the Lord gave them over. Look at verse number 9. It says, "Now God caused the official to show favor and sympathy to Daniel." See how God's involved? Do you see when Daniel purposes in his heart to follow God, God stands up for him. He gets to work. And I want you to understand that when you choose, whether you're a youth or you're an adult or a child, when you say in your heart and you purpose in your heart before God, "I'm going to walk with God and I'm going to stand for Him," God's got your back. And God's got Daniel's back. And look what he does. He changes the heart of the official. But look what he says, "I'm afraid of the Lord my King, who has assigned your food and drink." He says, "Why should he see you looking worse than the other young men? The king would then have my head." Okay, so this official understands, if this plan doesn't work, I'm toast. My head's on the platter. So it has to be God working in the heart. How many of you would say, "I'm going to give this little experiment a test, and if it fails, I'm dead"? Okay? No. But see, when God's involved, supernatural things can happen. So even though this leader said, I know the consequences, look what he says, he's going to do it. Daniel then said to the guard whom the chief official had appointed over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, please test your servants for 10 days. So Daniel proposes a test. Give us nothing but vegetables to eat and water to drink. Then compare our appearances with that of the young men who eat the royal food, and treat your servants in accordance with what you see. So in a sense, Daniel's saying, listen, give us water and vegetables for 10 days, and if we look worse, then you can deal with us. But look at what God does. At the end of those 10 days, they looked healthier and better nourished than any of the young men who ate the royal food. See, when God's involved, He'll do things for His glory, even in the midst of a pagan, godless culture. And if I can encourage our youth, and I can encourage you this morning, you can make a difference in a pagan, ungodly culture we live in, if you'll make a stand for God. It's not going to be easy, but look what God does. I want to end, and I'm out of time, I want to end with 2 Chronicles 16:9. If you'll turn there, this directly relates to what God did here. 2 Chronicles 16:9. Second Chronicles 16:9 says, for the eyes of the Lord, for the eyes of the Lord range throughout the earth to strengthen those whose hearts are fully committed to Him. Now think about that. Daniel purposed in his heart, and God showed Himself strong on his behalf. Some translations say that the eyes of the Lord range to and fro to show Himself strong. Now, speaking directly to young people, when you stand for the Lord, He promises, this is a promise, with a condition, that if you stand for Him, He is going to show Himself strong on your behalf. There's another verse that says that God will hold nothing good from those whose heart is steadfast towards Him. That's exactly what took place here in the life of Daniel and these other 3 Hebrew children. That when they resolved and purposed in their heart to stand for God, He stood for them. And we go on to find out later in Daniel, He does it more than one time. At the fiery furnace, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego take a stand for the Lord. Matter of fact, go there. Go there. I wasn't going to go there, but I got 1 minute. So let's go there. I know we're not hungry, are we? Okay. All right, Daniel chapter 3. And we're just going to have to go through this a little. Well, and Daniel in the lion's den. We don't have time for that, but that's okay. You can read that one on your own. All right, Daniel chapter 3. I'm getting excited here about this. Okay, go down to verse 8. Daniel 3:8. It says, now keep in mind, Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego have graduated. It's been 3 years. God showed them favor, gave them way above and beyond all the other candidates that were involved in this. Put them in special places. They were doing things for God in the midst of this. And look at what happens in Daniel 3 verse 8. At this time some astrologers came forward and denounced the Jews. They said to the king Nebuchadnezzar, O king, live forever. You have issued a decree, O king, that everyone who hears the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, and harp, pipes, and all kind of music must fall down. Now remember, he built an image of gold, and his purpose was worship. And so anybody, when the music played, you better bow down and you better worship. And what happens here is that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, purpose in their heart, were not going to bow down. Because God said there's only one true God, God Jehovah, and we worship Him only. And look what happens. It says that the horns played and all the music, and Look what happens. And whoever does not fall down is going to be thrown in the fiery furnace.